So we can take a quick look at this to see, hey, what stocks do we want? And obviously the NNE is the best, and everybody knew it was going to be. But beyond that, there's a few things to look at here. First of all, you gotta look at your money. So this guy's got 62 bucks, which means he can buy any of these because they're parred at 62. I could also buy an E&H at 58 or an FDR. If I look at these though, these are the guys who were making the most money at their 10 a share or whatever, but they may not necessarily be the best purchases. You also have to look at, hey, does it have room for immediate improvement? Is it going to improve on this? We're only going to see one operating round. So again, you don't have to worry looking too far ahead. But is there anything that is likely to improve? I don't see anything. It looks to me like these prices are going to hold for this next round. Nobody bought a train, nothing interesting happened. So you'd have an opportunity to ditch a stock and get it. You obviously want to buy things that are at par value though then, because so these guys are at par of 62. Well, no, it actually doesn't matter. Everything's at par because we had 2 operating rounds. Go back once, go forward once. Nobody made big money. So yeah, it kind of doesn't matter what I buy. And I'll just do some investments. It looks like he does not have 62 bucks, and he doesn't either. But everybody's got enough to buy one more share, which means the people who had 7 shares are still keeping up, kind of. Most XX games, you don't want to hold 20% of a corporation because you might get it dumped on you. It's not a problem in this game. You do not have to worry about it. I mean, you could lose money because somebody sells a bunch of shares of something. But in general, you're not worried about, hey, am I going to get stuck with a shitty train? Nah, you might get stuck with 2 shares that go down in value. Or maybe all the way down to 0 if something horrible happens, but that's pretty hard to happen. But I did buy a share of WNR instead of an ENR. In part, diversification seems wise. If something good happens to one, it's playing it safer or whatever. But the other side of it is, if I'm not shifting shares around, and there's still good reason to try to keep priority on your side in any game, having just one share of a company is cool. Because if a merger happens and you have only one share of a company, you still have an option to buy half of the completed company. Whereas if you have 2 shares, you lose one of your 2 shares. You're losing the same amount of money either way. In terms of whenever the merger happens, you're almost always going to lose some money. Well, actually that depends. Because if you own the cheaper of the 2 companies, you're possibly going to gain money off of it. But in most cases, you're owning the long-standing company and you end up losing some cash off of that. But it's not the cash that's the big deal. It's how many shares you end up afterwards. So if I have 2 shares of ENR and the ENR merges, then I end up with 1 share of ENR at a higher value, but not as high as 2 shares probably. If I have 1 share of each, that gives me the opportunity to still have 1 share of each after any mergers. And I could end up, with 1 share of each in better companies after they merge. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, I'll keep going through this stock round. Similar point. So all 3 of the companies that are at 62 are at the same place in the payoff range. So why didn't I buy the NNS? Well, because if I do want to sell shares, I hurt my other shares with it. So you actually don't want to invest in your own corporation. It doesn't really help me to have more of these. The only reason you want to invest in your own corporation is if you're saying to yourself, yeah, I'm rocking and I have this beautiful plan. Nobody's got a beautiful plan right now. This is too early in the game. Everybody's kind of like, I'm not really sure what's going on. So yeah, people are going to be buying shares that are not their own corporation because they will cost themselves some share value if they end up selling those to float another corporation later. Okay, we've made our way around. This guy only had enough money for an FDR, and there was only one available because, hey, it's a low-priced company, so it ended up, he actually would have had enough to buy an ENH, but the ENH is doing the worst out of everyone. So even though it would steal from company money, it's not worth it to hurt yourself. But it does hurt him in a different way. He now only has 55 bucks, not enough to buy an FDR. Well, enough to buy only an FDR, and there are no more left. So, and somebody else could have bought an FDR and maybe forced him into an uglier decision. But, you know, they would be giving up their own dollar a share each time around. Why pick on one person? Well, it's the guy with the best railroad. So, yeah, but he's making about the same money. Okay. So that puts him in a neat position, or an interesting position, or something. He has two FDRs, 108, 158, 162. Two NNEs is less than two FDRs and makes more money. So if I want to improve my cash flow, I will sell these FDRs. But the cost for that is I give up priority entirely. The other option is not buy the shares and get priority. I think the extra money is worth it at this point. You want to be making good money in the game. Priority can be damn important, but who is necessarily interested in the same companies that I am? Yeah, I am not interested in either of the companies particularly that are available right now. The WNF maybe, I don't know. What am I running? A freight train? Yeah, that'll get me into the region. What's the WF running? It's running an express. That's not a terrible match. But what I'd really like to be picking up is probably something like the NGC here, the INB, not because they're local, although the INB can make good money local without any question, but because they're closer to my corporation. And by centralizing things, you're getting dots near yourself, and you're probably able to work better with them. It's not the only guarantee. The other side of things is, well, I kind of would like a freight train. No, I have a freight train. I probably would like an express train or something like that. But the local express, they're about equal. They really are. The INB local is really, really sweet if I can get that. That's pretty far out, though. So, yeah. L&H looks more promising, to tell you the truth. Not L&H, no. Which one? Which is this? That's over here. I don't know. I don't see anything I really... No, that's not where it is. Is it? No. I don't know where the L&B is. I guess that's up here. Yeah. L&D, whatever. Yeah, I don't see anything I'm really dying to get out of that second set either. So I don't know. But, yeah, given that I'm not really dying for that second set, selling these seems like a good idea anyway. I should show you how you sell. All right, so I dump both of these. I get 54 per, and it goes boink, boink. And I think this is the same stock market as 60 uses. So that's 108 bucks. I'm going to buy an NNE. So 108 minus 74 should be 34 back. We're still in the A trains. And this is kind of interesting because in the 8-player game, everybody's got one company for a while. But 8 companies come out, which means this is the 7th company. The 8th company guarantees that if 8 companies come out, that warranty is necessary, right? And you may want to buy additional warranties. But in 6 players, there's no room for an extra company. Now, so only 6 companies come out, which means we don't drive the train out here, and we don't drive, nobody's got the cash to start a second company right away. they were cutting it to the bone, whatever. I don't know. It would take a lot of work to get that second company out. So I'm getting a very different flow to the game than I think it'll happen in, say, 8 players, or, and even in 7, you might buy a second train. It's the cost of that extra $100 to get the better train that really makes it hard to do. Or, in the 6-player game, there's like 2 games where I'm sorry, the 7-player game, it might not happen, but I think in 5, I think we had enough money to start 2 companies. I'm not sure. I didn't calculate that out. I know in 4 you would. And so, the number of players actually really does change the pacing of the game in a way that, I don't think really happens in all XX games. In a lot of them, it's how much money is available in players' hands. So like in 1830, 6 players means there's a couple people who can get a corporation started, and maybe a third corporation starts if a couple people get together to form one. But usually the B&O and the Pen get started in 6 players. They're pretty much guaranteed to start. They may not be the best choices, but they tend to be the 2 companies that start. In 5 players, though, I think anybody can start a company. So you see 6 companies start right off. So, I mean, you get this really, really different flavor to the game based on the number of players. And that just tends to be an XX thing. And I look at it as the maximum number of players is the normal amount. Here we're definitely seeing, this 6-player configuration seems to create a very different train rush from certainly what I saw in 8, where it's forced. And in less than 6, there may be a tendency for somebody to have 2 corporations real early and push the trains out themselves a little faster. So interesting choice to make it the 6-player game, which is probably the oddball out. He cuts off the ENH here, at least temporarily, and dots here. This was a hard call. Usually you want to dot outside the big city, but in this game, I'm not so sure. We got an open track going in there. I know this gets more important, but here's the thing. I might be able to connect up around this city and run through this. There's not a lot of riches just guaranteed to me down here. So it was a hard call in both directions, because the particular open cities mean this probably might end up empty anyway. Whereas this is almost assured to get closed eventually. And since no company starts there, let's make sure that we have our dot there and control that. This is my last dot for the underneath, so it's kind of a big deal. Still running for the same amount. Everybody's running for the same amount because the trains aren't falling. At this point, the board is almost completely played out. The FDR and NNE can play down into these spaces. I don't think there are any other openings that are available for track lays. So things had better break soon. Money dealt out, you can see. The big money makers are making have about $75 in cash sitting on them now, which means that they can buy NNEs, the most profitable things, or they can juggle and maybe buy a couple of shares of other things. So 75 plus an FDR will be 130. So 130 means that I could buy 2 of these guys at par, which probably is a better deal than an NNE is. I can get $20 on 2 shares instead of $12 on 1 share, plus more stock growth along the line. So that's appealing. I am going to do something with the FDR though. It's got $55. It is at 54. How is it at 54? People sold them. So I buy a share. And I'm only allowed to buy one, but that's going to produce me some income now. And eventually somebody will buy it back, possibly the owner if he needs to get cash into the company. Always a plan there. And that's the end of our stock round, and we go back into here. Now, nobody has the cash to charter a company. So again, we drop down to the actual stock round where he might be starting another company. Gotta think. Not much thinking to be taking place. He's falling behind here. He's got 50, 60, 70 bucks. Other people are making more. Two other players are making more than him off their current runs. He's got a decent run, but not the best shareholding. So I probably want to break the trains out and start doing stuff. But what does that mean? Well, that means eating this stupid A train. Maybe I leave it up to somebody who's making even less money. That's the problem with it. Do you want to shake things up or not? And do you want to just pass? Somebody's going to buy something. If nobody buys anything, I'm doing okay. That's the pure stasis solution. But I am almost certain somebody's going to buy something. So by delaying, I might be able to see whether anybody else starts a corporation and whether I want to still. The other thing I get to see is what stuff gets sold. So ENR and WNR, well, these guys with 75, he might be dropping an FDR to get a more valuable share, but the ENR and WNR are in the more valuable share line. On the other hand, 50, 60, 70, I do not have enough to get an N&E from par value. So there's nothing that's, I only can buy one additional share, and there's nothing that's really burning a hole, in my stomach saying I need to own this if I'm gonna just buy a share rather than start a corporation. So that's also a factor to look at. So like I was saying, the 6-player game is kind of an anomaly in this. And we're taking a look at this guy, and I calculate out his potential, if he sells everything except his own corporation. He only has 207 bucks. That is not enough to start a corporation. Corporation starts at 54 per. That's going to cost him 270. So I don't think anybody's going to be able to start a corporation this time. So I think it's going to have to go around once more, unless a couple people come to an agreement and collude. Usually I don't see collusion in an XX game, but this seems like an extreme circumstance where the game is kind of stuck because of the 6 players again. And, maybe the prices I chose or whatever, at a location where nobody can start a new corporation. So I'm going to poll people, using dice, whatever, and see who's willing to kind of work together. It might come to his advantage as the guy with priority that he's going to get the company out of it or whatever, and that might be enough of a reason to sell off some shares. Of course, if he's selling off shares, that makes more valuable stuff available to other people at slightly lower prices, which might be more intriguing for them as well. But people are going to keep their agreements. You don't have to. In fact, there's some argument that, there shouldn't be any table talk, any kind of collusion or anything, because it's not in the rules. But I find the idea of someone taking the chance of selling off shares and starting a corporation they can't possibly float as being too big a step without some sort of agreement. And I see no reason in terms of the subject matter or whatever that there wouldn't be collusion amongst the railroads. In fact, the lack of collusion that I see in most XX games that I play solo especially, I both find asymptomatic of the games. Usually when you sit down to games, somebody will say something like, I'm thinking of floating this. Anybody in for it? I can make a lot of money for you. In terms of the subject matter itself, the actual rail barons would certainly be cutting backroom deals with their cigars and their brandy. So in either case, except for those groups that have this kind of rule against table talk, which, it's not explicitly disallowed either. Of course, neither stealing from the bank. Yeah, okay, but it didn't work out. He was willing to do it, getting control of the corporation. Nobody else was willing to do even a share except him, and he was not willing to go to 2 shares. So it looks like we're just going to invest. Buy 1 share, so priority stayed where it was. We shift back up where we didn't want to be. Let's take a quick look at the purchases. So these guys buying, well, this guy buying, one of those decent $10 a shares, but he was forced to buy an E&H. This is why this guy's particularly hosed, and I didn't even consider this, but his E&Hs are getting bought out, and the advantage of his being able to make runs and pull money into his corporation is slipping away now. So this guy bought one, and this guy bought one. But he had his own advantage in his mind, which was he was able to buy another N&E. And again, so was he. So the people with the most cash on hand. And in fact, wasn't doing that badly. So his only excuse for defense, which I also, which I did not consider, like I said, was he wants to defend his corporation. That was his only reason that he wanted those extra shares out that I can justify. I shouldn't have been rolling for him, given my mindset. And, well, we got a few track lays, but otherwise we're just going to run out. Next round, we are going to see corporations start, though. There's enough shares out there that people are going to kick them off. I didn't consider was the concept of somebody towards the back of the pack holding or even selling a share so that they could charter a corporation. Early money's so important in an XX game that I don't think it's a good idea to skip an extra operating round beyond the one that it takes to float a corporation to get one kicked out like that. But it is another little tool you have there. Like a lot of the choices in this game, though, I feel like for the most part, they aren't real. Like, you have a lot of mechanical things to do, and there are a lot of options available to you, but usually the one you want to take, and obviously colluding with someone is something different, but usually when you're not looking at collusion, the one that you actually really do want to take is pretty damn clear. And all there is an optimization problem over the board. Which company is best for you at this point to float? Which trains do you want to have? Where do you want your dot? All those kind of questions. That's what you're looking at. You're not looking at... There's a lot of weird little tactical maneuvering that's hard to judge in your 1830 style XX game, where you can fiddle with the stock market. You can do so many things that have so many effects down the road that you really can't predict. Now, even in this one, there's some effects that you can't predict, but largely, and this may be where Clearclaw's dislike of it comes, there's not a lot of the butterfly effect. You can usually calculate out what it is you want to do. The one thing that comes in play, though, is early on, and at a few key points, there's big strategic decisions that you have to make. And I think those are real. I don't think that those are kind of the kind of decisions that you're like, I can just calculate this out trivially. I think they're so far in the future. So there's not a lot of impact on other players, though, in terms of you're doing something that you're fiddling around to hurt someone else, not just because you're trying to hurt their position in the game. That's often... I usually consider that going a little above and beyond in terms of the harshness of an 18XX. But knocking someone out, if you can put a coup de grace on someone and just say, well, you're not going to win. Well, you've just reduced the player count. And that's a good thing if it's not hurting you. But more often it's, I need this advantage right now, and it hurts them. Cool. I'm not seeing a lot of that here. that you have these different options of little sort of tactical tweaks that you can play with the stock market. Maybe with dots, but I feel like dots are more a matter of, dots are almost so automatic to me at this point that they just feel like those kind of optimizations. I'm looking and I'm saying, yeah, I need that dot. Too bad it hurts someone. The stock round 2 of the 3 track lays were made. The FDR made them. The NNE did not want to make any track lays particularly. I'm not quite sure why. And nobody dotted any further. Everybody pretty much made a good deal of money. This guy is falling behind, strangely enough, a little bit. It looks like others are in that 75 range, although he's up to 85. He's really kind of cranking. He may have made a mistake. He bought another share of the FDR in here. That means he no longer has $200 for the next train. But his thinking is, yeah, you know, I'm not sure I want a 2 freight train for $200. And if I do, I can put the cash in myself. But it may be the situation that he actually wants another corporation instead. There's kind of an iffiness about not, so there's a risk to not buying that B train. But here's the other thing. By the time the B train, if the B train goes, there are not that many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 of them, and I'm playing the long game. I could have looked that up on this little card. There's 6 of them, which means, you know, if a lot of people are starting corporations, and if people are expanding to their B train, for example, the ENR or whatever, well, then maybe I do end up needing instead a C train for 280, but at that point I can sell off shares and make that jump up. So there's two things that are possible going on here. Either other corporations are not going to be buying the B trains, in which case I'm in the same place as they are, yet with a couple shares that are going to be making money. Although I of course cannot buy IPO shares. I'm buying them always at face value. They got to come from the bank pool. So the fact that somebody sold my shares is why I'm able to do that, and why none of the other companies can do shit. So I don't think it was a mistake. Is basically what I'm coming to. Is I'm keeping pace with everyone else. If they do push the trains out hard enough that a C comes out, then, well, I'm in fine shape to get one. Not so fine after that, though. But, you know, that's what mergers are for, right? All right. Nobody's got the kind of cash in hand to be able to do a charter. So we move on into the stock purchases, and he's got first shot. And I bet he's got enough money to do something. Does he want to? He's making now the kind of money that guy's making. There are no more NNEs available, though. So I don't know. You know, he still doesn't have the cash on hand to do it, which may mean nobody does again. However, I'm less interested in forcing one. Here's the question. Do I think anybody else is doing it? And this is where you listen to the table talk. Because if someone else is trying to cut a deal, well then, yeah, you don't buy a share, you hold. But if no one is, you probably want to grab a share. Of course, on the other hand, there are limited numbers of these shares available. And especially of the WNRs, which don't hurt me to buy. Like, I won't be forced to sell them when I want to float a corporation. So, oh, did I may have miscounted. I think I did. I may have enough. 74 times 3. Yeah, I screwed up. I have more money. I have 85, 89 more bucks. I did not count right. Yeah, I thought I should have enough. And that divided by 5, I hate calculators, gets me the possibility to start a corporation at 62. So at this point, I look and say, is there a corporation that I really want? Because I'm doing okay. Continuing to invest might be all right, but that WVR is real close. That's an express train. I'm running a local. They're a little different. I don't know. You know, this looks like a 50-50 type decision to me. Note, that is the only corporation that's available to be purchased right now. There are only two corporations available, the WVR and the W&F. The W&F is, oh no, it's located over here. Okay, so that could be started as well. Boy, that looks kind of iffy. Wow. So now the question is, do I think somebody else is going to do it? Everybody's got the capability. Somebody's probably going to do it. That means share prices are going to drop. But what does that mean? This is available to me right now for 62 bucks. It probably is not going to be available for so little. So the real question now then is, do I want the WNR or do I want to wait on, let's see, I may have the wrong company here, the N&B, which is this one, which is much, much more pleasing. If I buy the WNR, I'm probably handing other people a bonus in terms of I'm dropping stock values right away, but I am getting another company out, and is it really an appealing merger? I could drive track through here. Note that the green track and the brown track, none of it ever, there's no merging track. Like, you don't have Ys and things of those nature. So all I have here is the opportunity to connect things that aren't connected already. But this would take two turns because track upgrades take more time. So I may not get into here, which is a big deal because I will eventually get into London range, but it may be too late for me to drop a token. All kind of interesting stuff like that. There's so few corporations that have tokens now. Who is this down here? Probably the ECR. Yeah, so that's not going to be available for a while. I don't know. Actually made our way around without anybody buying until we're getting to two of the tail end players. Now, this guy obviously wants to. The question is, what happens if I jump in instead? I have more iffy shares than he does in terms of what I'd be selling. I may get the only corporation. So what is of interest? Well, the WNR Express maybe gets me close to a port. I'm kind of close to I'm already on a port. So that's not a big influence here. But it's already hooked up to track. It's kind of close to whatever the hell these towns are here. I can't remember. Ipswich and Colchester, I don't know. Yeah, where there's some riches, which is of some appeal. And there's also, I think he's going to do it, but I'm not convinced yet. But others decided just to pocket the money. They're all close in the running. They're not falling behind. Neither is this guy, really. But the shares are running out. He could buy an NS. If this did not break at this point, it would have to break next time because we're out of shares. You know, each person can buy one more share. That gets the NS out of the line, and now everything's bought out. But beyond that, was starting to feel kind of like a pathological situation in the six-player game, and that may just be the case. The six-player game may have a particularly ugly starting setup, But it's also the companies that were available and the ones that were purchased, although I think they were pretty much preordained. I really don't see choosing either of these given what was out there. But maybe in comparison to this. But the fact of the matter is, other than the NBS, nobody really has a synergy with any of the companies that are out there. And the way the track went out and everything, I mean, conceivably somebody could have gone here, but it's unlikely unless you were already planning it. So if the WNR was planning on starting that corporation, they would have gone for it. But it doesn't look like a tremendous synergy. It's not bad. It's not bad by any means. Getting a freight and an express is a good thing. I'm kind of thinking he missed an opportunity by doing this, especially since the ENR, if he's going to buy something, what's he going to buy? Well, no, I am close to that. It's the EB and H that's not close. Well, we'll see. Interesting. He actually did not have enough cash, which is a sign he's not doing very well. And I'm using this because we don't use this end of the board for quite some time. I'll shift things around as needed. But that puts me on the E&H player, and he would be the person taking the break to start this company. If he doesn't start it, if he buys a share instead of NBS, can he? 50, 60, 70, yeah. Then priorities here, and these two corporations might both be gone by the time I get to go. And then it becomes the question of, well, then what? Then we're looking at a different set of companies. The L&H, which is appealing to me, although it's a local in a shitty place for a local. This train set is really awful. The L&D, if I can find that, that's this one up here. Again, a local, not in quite as bad a position. Where am I seeing? Here. Not in a terrible position here, but these dots have already been claimed for this track, which means I would have to place new dots in. That's not terribly good. A freight, I already have a freight. You can do some interesting things with with a couple of different freight trains together. Remember, they combine. So if they're big enough, but they won't be at this point, they'll be a 2 and a 1, which is a 3 for the E&H. That would allow me to go 1, 2, 3, which isn't terrible. I do get to increase my total run by this big area, so I'd be at 70, 130, which is I'm doubling the rate of my company, but I'm not getting what I really want, and what I really want is an express train, probably, which unfortunately is in the hands of the WNF, but it's going to be painful to link. Yeah, I mean, my choices are locals that don't look good. Where's the WSTL? That starts up here with a local with no dots near it. Of course, I don't need the dots near it. I can work with them near me, and there are some near me. So I think I too am going to pass, simply based on the fact that I'm not thrilled with either of these. They just don't appeal to me. Yes, I'm not doing great in terms of cash, but I have a lot of enemies, which are making a little more, which helps make up for my E&Hs. Ooh, there's a problem though. My E&Hs could get bought up if people still don't want to start a company. Jeez. Ah, crap. Well, I'm going to put it 50-50 then. On I go for, and I guess I go for, I mean, both are possible. This could plausibly link up here. And it is an express that actually gets me track going out there. It's not that bad. The W and F I don't like because it's got no track. So yeah, you know what? I am just going to do it. Put everybody in an interesting position because I don't know if anybody really wants the W and F now. It seems like a silly time. especially since they all bought shares, they can't afford it anymore because you can't sell those shares. But it does bring these more valuable NNEs up. Now, so for him, he bought a WNR. He could still sell a WNR, but he could also sell one of his other certificates to buy the NNE if he has enough cash on hand. Is it worth it? Well, this is where it gets interesting because he's got 2 shares of each company, so maybe he's better off holding, but if he doesn't, this guy's going to sell something and hurt me anyway, so I don't know. NNEs started creating some havoc because they are worth more. So we saw a dumping of a lot of shares going around as people saw better things they could buy. And then when we got over here, well, an FDR went away in exchange for a WNR. Likewise, an ENH went away in exchange for an NNS. This is crushing the stock values for everything. Terrible. But what we do have is he's coming back to buy his shares. Now, if there was some chance that there would be still more shakeup, it starts getting confusing because not only do I have to remember what I sold, which is hard enough on these kind of stock rounds, and I'm kind of tired, having woken up way too early. Like I got way too little sleep, and I'm starting work in an hour or so. But also, I'm not feeling too well, to be honest. I also have to worry about which shares did I buy. Now, which shares did I buy? I can just tilt. Which shares I can sell because I'm keeping track of 2 different things. I can use tokens. There's so many train corporate tokens in this game that there are probably some extras, at least early in the turn, to help remind me. So, like the fact that he has both bought and sold a WNR. So he's bought this WNR. He can't possibly buy another. But I could put a WNR token here. I don't think I have an extra one popped yet. And that would allow me to remember that I can't buy those because I've sold them, which makes a difference because I also can't sell this one. Painful. It's hard enough to remember that you can't buy something, but now if you have can't buys and can't sells too, I feel like I need some sort of mnemonic to remind me. But I think what's just going to happen is he's going to buy out his WVRs, and we'll get it floated for you. Noticed I had made the mistake of putting it up here. This was a non-chartered company. Floated. I bought 3 extra tokens. The reason for that is I'm kind of thinking I want at least 1, 2, and having another one seems wise. I've got too much money on there. Shit. I owe $340 out of here. Yeah. Yeah, I put it as if it's fully capitalized and put all the shares there. I'm a little sleepy. This is the only corporation that's floating this turn. I don't feel uncomfortable with this amount of money. I will be able to buy the 2 train. I'd be able to anyway. I could release an additional share if I was forced to buy a train. The token starts immediately. Priority stays here. I've got 2 partial capitalization non-chartered corporations in play. At this point, I have not grabbed my express permit. And I think this is going to work out okay for him, I say. Hoping. And that will be it as we go back to another A-train only yellow round. Neat. Well, we're going to see something happen. But here's the thing. It's quite possible nobody buys this train. You can buy additional trains, but nobody has the capacity to run a second train. So unlike most 18XX games, what you're not going to see is the kind of train rush that's forced by, oh yeah, I can make a lot of good money. Without mergers, you can run 1 train. And again, this 6-player game is turning out very, very different from the 8-player game. I almost think that the number of players should impact the number of trains because this is just totally different from that 8-player game in so many ways. It's not like there's just a little more money. You could start your company. So here's the thing. In 1830, for example, what you might see in a six-player game is there's a lot of people buying trains, but companies might be, especially like the Penn, might be floating a little low, and because of that, there might not be this big willingness to buy a lot of trains. But if you're playing in less players, there's more money in each corporation, so there's more willingness to buy a couple extra trains. So there might actually be more corporations floated. You know, there will be in a four-player game. There will be in a six-player game. A six-player game, you're looking at 2 to 3 corporations, depending on whether or not somebody colludes. You know, I mean, it could go to 4 if 2 people collude, but it seems like such a bad idea when you can buy yummy B&Os. You know, in general. It's really hard to convince somebody else to go. In a 5-player game, you see 5 corporations start probably, but they're starting so low that most of them can't afford that big train rush. And of course, then the B&O may not start. So then you only see 4 corporations start probably. In the 4-player game, you're probably seeing 4 corporations start. So again, the number of players can really affect how much you have here. But this is especially harsh. Like the 8-player game, we saw 8 companies start. That forced the train out. I think those trains are going to come out quickly in any other number, honestly. As long as the 5-player... I checked it. I'm not sure. Both the 5 and 7 are kind of iffy. The 5-player, it depends on whether or not everybody can start a corporation. Well, whether anybody can start a second corporation. And the 7-player, not everyone, not all 8 corporations get started, which that is an issue. That is an issue. That'll be like the 6-player game, I think. Just in terms of not clearing these out, and it's going to be really hard to buy that B train. Somebody might do it, but I don't know if it's going to happen here even. Interesting. Kind of interesting situation where time is sort of frozen until the WVR actually runs. Everybody's just going to make the same money they do. They might have a dot they want to play because of the WVR coming in. So, for example, you know, here might be important, or I know it's an N. But run-throughs of those big cities are important. There are a lot of corporations in this game, and you don't have a lot of dots. So I'm looking. The N&E is already out of its dots, right? It's already used its up. That's not going to be playing that, but other people might be interested in, hey, this is where the important dot is. The problem is you make that the important dot, and it may become the important dot because someone else can close it off for you, or it may be that everybody else starts working to build around it because it's too big a threat. It depends on what it is, where it is, etc. That's one problem with the normal cities, is that nobody needs to run through them, but maybe some people don't need to run through this. In particular, the freight trains do not need to run through the big cities. They don't care about them. Except that those are good places to connect to another company, to your other train. Yeah. One oddity that comes into my mind right now, I'm running the WNR right now. The NNE actually did a dicky little move here because I'm more likely to be interested, I think, in the N and B space and merging with that than I am in this area where all the companies have already come out. So, since it's hard to branch, I could do it from this city, but whatever. It might be especially with a local train, which I don't have with the NNE. I have an express right now. Forever. To go up there. The N and B is interesting to me, though, because it has a freight train. So it might be something I want to merge with. So hooking that up seems to make some sense to me. So the one remaining track lay was chosen by them this time, and it was kind of a dicky one. But anyway, back to what I was trying to express. I get sidetracked so damn easily. The WNR is going to run, They don't have any track to lay, but they have a token to play. But here's the problem. So I flipped up the companies that should be available in the next run, which now includes 3 companies right in here. Wow. Really right in the world that the WNR is playing in. And I want to get into here. Well, what does that mean? That means that the WSTL and the L&H are both really interesting to me. If I get one of those, I don't want the same dot, right? I'm in the second position, so there's a fair chance that I can get the one I probably want the most, the L&H, for whatever value it has more use. But wowzer, you know, I mean, seriously, it really doesn't do a lot of. It doesn't make me happy to be in this position because, and here's where it gets weird. If I were to play that dot there just before the L&H gets to lay its own dot, mine would get bumped if there's no capacity for the L&H to go. And chances are I am going to run before it. I'm up here at 86 bucks a share. But I can't guarantee that. There's a lot of money out there, right? If I place that dot now, though, and green comes up, 2 people could place there, and maybe that company just gets shut down. And that's not a big deal. Then I can play for this company, whatever. But, which isn't as pleasant because it's a local. I would really like, oh, I'm sorry. They're all local. No, I'm not interested in a freight. I am a freight. Okay. Although not a very good one, so a bigger freight might be interesting at this point in the game still. But what happens in the case of a merger, this is like the one time that you get screwed in this game. If 2 companies have station markers in this, if the companies that merge together have station markers in the same space, one of the tokens goes away, and it doesn't go back to the company charter. It gets discarded from the game. You know, I mean, it's available in later mergers or whatever, but it's no longer an available token. So I could lose a token by placing it there at the wrong company. And of course you could say, well, you could play down here or something. You're going to want that, aren't you? Yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to break through to London, and maybe this isn't that important in that case. Maybe this run is the one I end up making, you know, or whatever. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what would fall out there, and that's where the game is not completely sort of calculable. It's definitely a case where you're not calculating, you're taking a risk, and you got to make a decision, and probably either way you choose, you're going to make the wrong decision. Well, I'd rather make the wrong decision than have an extra token, you know, but that's just me. WVR, and there's all sorts of interesting possibilities here. First of all, I can't build any track, no matter what I do, but I am allowed to merge. I could merge the WVR and E&H, except they're not connected right now, okay? Pass that by. That option is gone. So I'm stuck doing what companies do. And there's no tokens, no track I can lay, but I can buy a train. And I only have enough money for one. Okay, so I have less options than I thought. I will buy an express train, and that now makes the Phase B trains available for purchase. And I'll pull the Phase Ds, which are not permanent trains, off the board. This guy is an A, so he gets a warranty. I could buy more warranties. The A's go away as soon as the C comes out. There's a number of B's available, though. It's hard to tell how much these companies that have just an A train, how many of them are going to want to buy a slightly better train, right? The freight train can get 30 extra bucks if it's running a port. These guys can improve their runs slightly. Like if they don't want to run to their home city or whatever, but they probably can't make a really big difference. So, in this case, I'm not going to be able to improve a run at all by switching to, say, running 1, 2, 3. I'm getting the best run I can anyway. So that's the kind of thing you got to look at, but you'll also have to look at it in light of what else might they start and what else might get started anyway. There are 5 companies that could float. That would eat up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these deuces, but not 6 of them. And the only way any of them can start is if somebody buys one of those B trays, which he can't. I don't think we're going to run through and reach phase C. I don't think this warranty matters, but the next one might. I don't know. Not going to buy one. It looks like this game is going to be really static to me, but I may be completely wrong. Making the judgment on those warranties, they're a new thing to me, so they're kind of hard to evaluate. Before I make the decision on that, ENR, there's a share of that available that he could purchase. He might want to. At $78, it still gives him enough money that he could have bought the 2, so I think he does want to buy it. Come to the the ENH. Still, the trains aren't out there. The ENH is running its crappy little 7 a share. I have just enough money to buy me a freight train here. And then I would be able to go from 7 a share to 12 a share. How big a deal is that? How big a difference? That's a good question. And how much am I shaking this shit up? And how many shares do I have compared to other people? So I'm sitting on 10 shares. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for the FDR. That's the other guy who bought small. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. One thing you'll notice is that everything's running kind of the same. This is a much, much more balanced game in terms of starting positions early in the game, etc., compared to almost all the others. So like if you look at 1830, for example, in the early game of it, if you're playing a 6-player game, usually you're looking at the B&O and the Penn as the 2 companies that are out, and maybe one other company, in which case it's probably like the B&M or something like that can make good money, although I know one guy who always wanted to start the C&O for some damn reason. It's okay, but the big money that you could make off the B&O shares was so much more than the money you made off the Penn shares. But the Penn shares tend to be $67 shares just because of the whatever you had, 404 or 402 or whatever, split up. And the B&O shares were almost invariably $100 shares. So it was like this weird situation where you can make a lot more money on the B&Os, but you had to invest a lot more. Even proportionally, you still made more because stock values went up more too. But it just created this weird dynamic where, like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm even talking about. But anyway, what we're seeing here is not that kind of weird dynamic. All the companies except the NNE and the ENH are running pretty normal. The combination of the trains that came out and the railway and the companies that came out just meant that most of the corporations are about the same. And there's sort of a best company, a middle tier, and then a lousy company. And that's it, and there's not that big a difference between them. It's not, because you're only limited to one train at the beginning of the game. But even given that, yes, I have an extra share over the people who are doing better, but that's not going to last much longer. I'm holding that on 6. I have room for 2 more shares, which may be more than other people do. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These guys only have room for 1 more share. So I can actually fill out more of my portfolio, and there are shares I can still buy. There's ENHs, there's FDRs, There's ENR, you know, both in the bank pool and in some of the company treasuries. So maybe I don't want to break things open. If I break things open, what does it mean? It means the FDR gets to lay a bonus track, a green track. They, of course, do not seem to currently have the cash, but they may. I doubt it. They're going to be making 9 a share. That's not going to push them over the 200. So unless they swallow, if they swallow, they have enough. If they don't swallow, they don't have enough to buy the first 2 train. I'm calling them 2, B train, whatever. But what that means is what? That's the whole question, isn't it? I don't know what the answer is. You know, I've got this warranty here. That becomes worth something if the seas fall right now, but that kind of hoses my poor little company. I can't merge my companies without buying that train. I'm going to do it. Although I'm doing pretty well down here on cash. Am I not? No, I'm doing shitty. Look, everybody else has got piles of money. Yeah, we're going to do it. I mean, we'll be getting more shit soon. But so, I never know if I'm making a huge mistake here. So I will buy the $200 B train. And that moves the phase forward. What happens with the phase change? Green tiles become available. There'll be 2 operating rounds between. I could lay a token. Do I want a token? I have a lot of tokens. There are a lot of companies that could come out ahead of me. I'm not that high on the stock chart. I'm going to grab this token. That's pretty damn important to me, I think. Nobody starts there either, which is another thing. So if I do get to start a company, I will not be losing a token because of it. And now I got to think about the FDR. Mention one of the reasons that I did want to do this, because I would have to start draining my treasury to move forward on the stock chart. I'm only making 7 a share. By increasing my share value, I get to keep, or my run value, I get to keep going forward without draining my share value. So if you're doing that George Hudson maneuver, you're probably running your company wrong. You know, I mean, it's not horrible to do. In fact, you'd want to do it if you didn't buy this train, but just to make sure your stock value is going up. But, you know, wow. Yeah. Okay. So what did I do? The FDR upgraded this because that allows me to make $10 a share. I do not know. I have the feeling I'm going to be buying another company, getting an influx of cash somehow. I don't know how much. See, that's one of this guy's problems. All his money's tied up in the 2 companies he has now, right? He doesn't have a way to get a quick influx of cash. Whereas I've got a whole bunch of money that could go into, I mean, I could buy FDR shares, but it could also go into starting another corporation. What other corporation? Yeah, I don't know. The NNB is the only one that's at all appealing to me, I think. Nothing else really links me up nicely, because the others are all way up the hell over here. So, I don't know, maybe I stay with the FDR. If I stay with the FDR, I need to buy that train. But I don't need to buy it right now. Oh, yeah. I'll hold off, because maybe I can get the C train for $280 instead. I doubt it, though. Okay. We'll see how many companies start. See what happens. And maybe I will start a corporation up here. Someday they may merge. I mean, there's a lot of track on the board. At some point, that track's going to merge together, and dots are going to open up, and there's going to be a run going through, and then, hey, it's time I can merge. So, it's not necessarily a terrible thing. I do not want the NNB because that's a freight train. So, yeah, I don't know. But I do know that I don't want to spend the money. I want to make my run instead. And that clearly means I also want to buy a share, which I did. That's going to put us into the petition round. And wow, I'm sure like spending a lot of time babbling during this game. I don't think it's a bad thing. I feel like XX's I can speak to a lot more coherently than I can about other games. I know some people are going to say, no, you're, if anything, less coherent. Okay, well, maybe. But, yeah. I at least feel like I'm able to reason better about this than, say, I am about, I don't know, Vietnam, where I just don't feel like I have a grasp on. You know, I can do it mechanically. I can feel like I'm doing things, sort of, but like, wow, I just don't have a real, like, target that I'm aiming for. I'm just like, well, yeah, I'll chase down that unit, you know, whatever. Here, I actually feel like. So I'm going to load this one up, and we'll see what happens in terms of the new corporations. Priority's over here, which means he has sort of the first play. Here's the thing. Any corporations that are any good, people may want, people would want to release as chartered companies. But nobody's got the cash on hand, do they? We got like 125 over there. We got a little less than that here, 100 and something there. We just do not have the cash to release a chartered company, which means, and this did not happen in the 8-player game at all, it means we're going to devolve into regular priority deal and releasing non-chartered companies. Yes, the game just changes so dramatically by the player count. I find this astounding, really. I'm not used to an XX game. You know, I'm used to the possibility of maybe the train rush is slowed down at the beginning. Maybe this happens that's different. Maybe this happens. In this one, it feels like the player count is just, it so dramatically changes the game that I am not playing the same game that I played, you know, a couple days ago.